Unlock that gate right now or I'm calling the police. Melody Whitmore is screaming at me through my own fence at 7 a.m., her face red as her Lexus paint job. Behind her, a line of neighbors in expensive cars are honking, late for work because I locked the gate on my property. Go ahead and call them, I say, sipping my coffee. Ask them about trespassing laws. 3 years of this woman's harassment. 3 years of her treating my inherited land like her personal highway. Well, guess what, Melody? While you were busy filing fake complaints and vandalizing my equipment, I bought something that's about to make your life very, very complicated. The metallic clang of the gate staying locked. The satisfying crunch of gravel as cars reverse in defeat. The distant hum of traffic on the highway. The long way around. See, they wanted me to unlock my gate, so I bought the road they all drive on and closed it forever. What would you do if your HOA tried to steal your property? Where are you watching from? Drop your location below. My name's Ezra Blackwood, and 6 months ago I thought inheriting my grandmother's 2-acre property would be my salvation. 47, recently divorced diesel mechanic who was tired of fixing everyone else's problems while my own life fell apart. Grandma Rose's 1960s ranch house sits like a fortress among towering pines, surrounded by the kind of peace that makes you forget the world exists. Morning air thick with the scent of her lavender and the diesel fume from my work trucks. What I didn't realize was that my little slice of heaven holds the key to Willowbrook Estates, 47 McMansions where the mortgage payments exceed my annual income. Back in 1985, some developer cut corners. Instead of building proper access through HOA land, they sweet-talked Grandma into a handshake deal, letting them cross 37 feet of her property corner. No paperwork, no easement, just neighborly trust. Grandma installed the gate in 2019 after vandals trashed her garden shed 3 times. Smart woman gave the code to emergency services and postal workers. The gate wasn't about keeping good people out. It was about keeping trouble out. Then I met Melody Whitmore. Picture a 52-year-old woman who measures grass height with rulers and times trash, can placement with stopwatches. Pearl white Lexus SUV, $800,000 Colonial, 6 years as HOA dictator. Her husband Brad's some insurance big shot, no kids, and way too much time to terrorize 47 families. The sharp rat-a-tat-tat of designer heels on my porch, like a woodpecker with anger issues. Week 3, 7 a.m. door-pounding session. That gate stays unlocked 24/7, she announced. Not asked. Announced. For resident convenience and property values. I offered the emergency code, explained it was private property. Her face transformed from fake sugar to pure acid. Listen carefully, grease monkey, she sneered, eyeing my work clothes. I don't negotiate with people who don't belong in decent neighborhoods. Unlock it, or I'll bury you in legal fees until you're living in that rusty truck. The metallic slam of my screen door as she stormed off. That night, I found Grandma's papers. Original 1960 survey, crystal clear property lines. The developer's road crosses my land. No recorded easement anywhere in county records. My lawyer, Sarah Martinez, laughed when I showed her. Son, they've been trespassing for 40 years. You could lock that gate tomorrow and there's not a damn thing they could do legally. But Melody wasn't done. Day 4, anonymous complaint to the county about my illegal commercial vehicle storage. My work trucks parked on my own driveway. Day 6, noise complaint about diesel engines at 6:30 a.m. Day 8, EPA complaint about my compost pile being illegal dumping. The satisfying thud of complaint letters hitting my kitchen trash can. Each complaint required official responses, wasted county resources, and proved one thing. Melody Whitmore would rather burn the neighborhood down than admit she was wrong. The numbers painted the picture. Willowbrook's only access crosses my land. Alternative route? 8 miles, 35 minutes instead of 12. During morning rush hour, that's the difference between getting kids to school on time and explaining to your boss why you're late again. But here's what really lit my fuse. I talked to other neighbors. Dorothy Chen whispered about $300 fines for Christmas lights staying up past January 2nd. Marcus Reed, a firefighter, mentioned Melody once threatened a lien over his mailbox being non-regulation black instead of regulation brown. This woman had turned a neighborhood into North Korea with landscaping requirements. Distant sound of leaf blowers operating in perfect synchronized timing. like some suburban military drill. So when Melody escalated from threats to actual harassment, filing false police reports and vandalizing my equipment, I realized something important. Grandma Rose didn't raise me to roll over for bullies. Time to teach HOA royalty what happens when you mess with working-class property rights. Week 4, and Melody decided to go nuclear. I'm drinking my morning coffee when the certified mail arrives. 3 pages of legal-sized fury claiming my gate was illegally blocking public access to essential services. 23 signatures from neighbors who apparently thought petition drives were more reliable than property surveys. The crisp snap of the envelope opening, like breaking the seal on Pandora's box. But here's what Melody didn't count on. I actually know how to read legal documents. My divorce taught me that lesson the hard way. Back then, my ex-wife's lawyer tried pulling the same intimidation tactics until I started doing my own research. Turns out, when someone threatens legal action over property you actually own, the best response is to make them prove their case. County Surveyor's Office? I'd like to request a formal boundary survey, I said into the phone that afternoon. At county expense, since there's apparently some confusion about where public roads end and private property begins. 3 days later, surveyor trucks rolled up like a small army. Steve Martinez spent 6 hours with GPS equipment and metal detectors, mapping every disputed inch. I sat on my porch, watching Melody pace her driveway like a caged animal, probably calculating how much this official survey was about to cost her credibility. Electronic beeping of survey equipment cutting through morning silence. Each beep another nail in Melody's legal coffin. The results were beautiful. 37 feet and 8 inches of road crossing my property. 0 recorded easements in county records dating back to 1960. The developer's 1985 permits clearly showed they were supposed to build access entirely within HOA boundaries, but took the cheaper shortcut through Grandma's land. I posted the official survey on the neighborhood Facebook page. Facts matter. No easement equals private property. Melody's response came in 30 minutes. Survey is fake news. Ezra Blackwood is mentally unstable veteran who threatens neighbors. For the record, I've never served in the military, never threatened anyone, and my sanity's holding up just fine. But watching her public meltdown was better entertainment than cable TV, the satisfying click of screenshots being saved for my evidence file. Then came noise complaint number 2, my diesel trucks violating quiet enjoyment ordinances at 6:30 a.m. Apparently, working people starting their day before Her Royal Highness finished beauty sleep was grounds for legal action. That's when I remembered something my lawyer Sarah had mentioned during my divorce proceedings. She'd explained how HOA rules work. They're like private club bylaws. You can't enforce club rules on people who aren't members, especially when they're on their own property. I spent that evening digging through municipal codes, and sure enough, county noise ordinances allow commercial vehicles starting at 6 a.m. Better yet, Melody's own husband leaves every morning at 6:15, warming up his Mercedes for 5 minutes in their driveway. Perfectly legal, perfectly hypocritical. The distant rumble of Brad's luxury engine, like irony with a German accent. County Inspector Pete Williams arrived to investigate Melody's gate complaint. 23 years of property surveys under his belt, 0 patience for neighborhood drama. He examined Grandma's permits, the survey results, and Melody's complaint with the thoroughness of a detective. "Ma'am, this gate is completely legal," he told her while she hovered like a helicopter parent. "Private property owners control access however they see fit, long as emergency services can get through." "But what about our convenience?" she demanded. Pete's deadpan response was poetry. "Convenience isn't a constitutional right. Property ownership is." That's when the neighborhood started cracking. Dorothy Chen appeared at my door with homemade cookies and a confession. "Melody told us you were some dangerous hermit," she said, shaking her head. "But you seem perfectly normal. She once threatened to fine me $300 because my Christmas lights stayed up until January 5th. Marcus Reed followed. Firefighter, built like a linebacker, soft-spoken as a librarian. "Emergency services never complained about your gate. We've got the code, works fine. Melody's been creative with the truth lately." Warm scent of Dorothy's oatmeal cookies mixing with pine-scented evening air. The Facebook war escalated beautifully. Every unhinged rant Melody posted triggered another neighbor sharing their horror story. Fines for wrong-colored mailboxes, threats over bird feeders, citations for parking infractions measured in half inches. But during my legal research binge, I discovered something that made me smile. I'd been reading about property law, specifically something called prescriptive easements. Basically, if someone uses your land long enough, they can claim automatic rights to keep using it. 20+ years of continuous use in our state. The road through my property? Built in 1985, only 15 years before Grandma's death. Legally insufficient. The satisfying scratch of pen on legal pad as I made notes. Turns out, just because someone's been crossing your land doesn't mean they own the right to keep doing it forever. Who knew that being nice to neighbors could actually protect your property rights better than being mean? Melody wanted a war over facts. Problem was, I had all the facts and she just had volume. Week 6, and Melody played her ace. Actual lawyers. The envelope from Whitman and Associates landed like a bomb. Cream-colored paper thick enough to stop bullets. Embossed letterhead that screamed, "We cost more per hour than you make per week." 3 pages demanding permanent easement rights or $50,000 in damages for intentional interference with property access. 50 grand for a gate on my own land. The weight of expensive legal paper, heavy as a mortgage payment. I'd seen this game during my divorce. Big firm, scary threats, designed to make working people fold without a fight. Back then, I'd nearly caved until my buddy Chuck Morrison introduced me to Sarah Martinez, property rights specialist who eats bullies for breakfast. Classic slap suit, Sarah said, spreading their threat across her desk. Strategic lawsuit against public participation. They're banking on you settling rather than fighting, even though they've got the legal standing of a house built on quicksand. Sarah's countermove was surgical precision, a preemptive quiet title action to establish my boundaries and slam the door on future claims. $3,200 well spent. But while we prepared paperwork, her paralegal, Jenny, made a discovery that shifted the entire battlefield. "Ezra, you need to see this," Jenny said, pointing to faded county records from 1985. The original development permits required the builder to create access roads entirely within HOA property. Look at this application. They lied to the county about their access plans. The rustle of decades-old permits revealing 40-year-old fraud. The developer had committed criminal fraud, building infrastructure on land they didn't own, then covering it up for 4 decades. Never filed easement paperwork. Never paid land use rights. Just bulldozed through Grandma's property and hoped nobody would ask questions until everyone involved was dead. "This changes everything," Sarah grinned. "They're not just trespassing. They're accessories to the original crime." Meanwhile, Melody was hemorrhaging support faster than a punctured tire. Her emergency HOA meeting to assess $500 per household for legal defense turned into a revolt. Dorothy Chen gave me the play-by-play. Janet Kowalski stood up and asked why we're paying for Melody's personal war. Marcus Reed pointed out that emergency services never complained. Half the room walked out when she started screaming about traitors and terrorists. Distant sound of slamming car doors as neighbors fled their own meeting. That's when I deployed psychological warfare. Started closing the gate precisely during rush hour, 7 to 9 a.m., 4 to 6 p.m. Posted a cheerful sign. Private property. Alternative access via Maple Street available. Then I'd sit on my porch with coffee, waving like the neighborhood's friendliest crossing guard, as expensive cars executed 3-point turns of defeat. Melody's Lexus got trapped behind a school bus on the alternate route, transforming her 12-minute commute into 35 minutes of gridlock hell. The satisfying click of gate locks engaging just as Mercedes' engines started warming up. The pressure cracked them faster than expected. 3 families approached privately, offering monthly access fees, to restore their shortcut privileges. The Hendersons offered $50 monthly. The Patels went to $75. Easy money, problem solved, everybody happy. Except, I remembered something from my divorce lawyer's playbook. My ex had tried claiming commercial use of my workshop because I occasionally charged neighbors for repairs. Pattern of commercial activity, she argued, changed residential zoning rights. Same trap here. Start charging access fees, establish commercial use patterns, complicate property rights forever. Sometimes rejecting easy money is the smartest investment you can make. The crisp sound of declined cash offers, worth more than the money itself. Word spread that I'd turned down guaranteed income to maintain principal. Suddenly, neighbors understood this wasn't about extortion. This was about finally standing up to 6 years of HOA tyranny. Janet Kowalski appeared at my door that weekend, nervous as a teenager confessing to parents. "We owe you an apology," she said. "Melody told us you were trying to extort everyone, but Dorothy explained the truth. We've been terrorized by her power trips for years. Maybe it's time someone with actual backbone stood up to her." But the real bombshell came Tuesday morning. Jenny called with news that made my coffee taste like Victory champagne. "Remember that original fraud we discovered?" I kept digging. Turns out Willowbrook Estates has been in violation of county development codes for 40 years. The county could theoretically condemn the entire access road system and force them to rebuild proper infrastructure entirely on HOA land. The electronic beep of my phone recording this conversation for posterity. 40 years of illegal infrastructure, tens of millions in potential reconstruction costs, and Melody thought she could intimidate me with lawyers? I looked out at the gate, watching another frustrated commuter execute a U-turn, and smiled. Melody had no idea she'd just declared war on someone holding nuclear weapons. Time to show her what mutually assured destruction really meant. Week 8, and Melody completely lost her mind. I'm fixing a transmission in my garage when Officer Pete Williams pulls into my driveway, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else on Earth. Turns out, Melody had filed a police report claiming I threatened violence with deadly weapons during our gate discussion. The metallic clang of wrenches hitting concrete as I wiped grease off my hands. "Ezra, I've known your family for 20 years, Pete said, adjusting his belt with the weariness of a man who'd seen too much neighborhood drama. "But I gotta ask, did you threaten Mrs. Whitmore with any kind of weapon?" I pulled out my phone, scrolled to the security footage from that morning's encounter. There's Melody screaming at my gate. There's me drinking coffee on my porch 30 feet away, and there's absolutely zero threatening behavior unless you count excessive politeness as assault. "She's filing false police reports now," I told Pete, handing him copies of the footage. "That's a felony, isn't it?" Pete's expression shifted from duty to disgust. "Yeah, it is. And between you and me, this is the third bogus complaint she's filed this month. We're starting to notice a pattern. But Melody wasn't done destroying her own credibility. That same week, my gate lock got mangled with bolt cutters at 3 a.m. Security cameras caught everything. Unknown male in dark clothing, face covered but walking with a distinctive limp that looked suspiciously familiar. The sharp crack of damaged metal breaking under my work boots. I upgraded to a heavy-duty electronic lock with phone alerts. Cost me $400, but now I get real-time notifications every time someone breathes near that gate. Technology is beautiful when it's protecting your property rights. The HOA meeting that Thursday night descended into civil war. Dorothy Chen live-streamed the whole thing on Facebook. Apparently Melody had banned recordings, but Dorothy's grandson taught her how to use her phone's stealth mode. Marcus Reed stood up first. "We're paying assessments to fund Melody's personal vendetta against a neighbor who's done nothing wrong. This stops now." Melody's response was pure theater. "Anyone questioning my leadership is obviously being bribed by that psychopath. He's probably paying you all to turn against me." Distant sound of 47 neighbors collectively realizing their HOA president had gone completely insane. 7 households formally refused the legal fund assessment, creating a budget crisis that threatened the HOA's basic operations. Janet Kowalski presented an alternative motion: suspend all legal action and negotiate reasonable access terms with me directly. The vote was 28 in favor, 12 against, 7 abstaining. Democracy in action, and Melody lost. Meanwhile, I'd been doing my own detective work. Called my cousin Tony, who works in municipal records downtown, asked him to dig deeper into Willowbrook's development history. What he found made the original fraud look like jaywalking. "Ezra, this is bigger than we thought," Tony said over beers at Chuck's garage. "The County Planning Commission has a file 3 inches thick on Willowbrook violations. Septic systems built without permits, wetland encroachment, stormwater management that doesn't exist. They've been flying under the radar for decades. The satisfying thud of a thick manila folder hitting the workbench. Turns out, when developers cut corners on access roads, they usually cut corners on everything else too. The entire development was a house of cards built on regulatory violations, and one phone call to the Wright County inspector could bring it all tumbling down." But here's where it gets interesting. While researching municipal codes during my divorce, I'd learned about something called grandfathering clauses. Basically, if violations existed before certain cutoff dates, they might be legally protected. But these violations were ongoing, active, and getting worse every year. The septic systems were overloaded, the storm drains dumped runoff directly into protected wetlands, and the electrical infrastructure hadn't been updated since Reagan was president. Every heavy rain turned the development's streets into rivers, and every summer brought power outages that lasted for days. The electronic hum of my phone camera documenting everything for future reference. That weekend, Melody played her final desperate card. She organized a protest at my gate during Saturday morning commute time. About 15 people with signs reading, "Unlock our neighborhood," and "Stop the land grab." Problem was, most of her protesters were from outside the development. I recognized exactly 3 Willowbrook residents among the crowd. The rest looked like they'd been recruited from her church or bridge club, people who probably couldn't find my property on a map without GPS guidance. The counter-protesters showed up an hour later, actual neighbors carrying signs like "Property rights matter" and "Melody doesn't speak for us." Marcus Reed brought his entire firehouse shift, still in uniform, supporting my right to control access to my own land. The rhythmic chanting of opposing crowds like democracy having an argument with itself. Local newspaper reporter Amanda Rodriguez showed up with cameras, interviewing both sides for what would become front-page news. Melody gave quotes that made her sound like she was running for dictator of a small island nation. I stuck to facts, documentation, and basic constitutional principles. By Sunday evening, the protest had collapsed, half of Melody's supporters had switched sides, and the Willowbrook Estates Facebook page looked like a support group for political refugees. Time to end this war once and for all. Tuesday morning, and Sarah's paralegal Jenny called with news that changed everything. "Ezra, you need to get down here immediately," she said, voice crackling with excitement. "I found something that makes Melody's gate obsession look like a distraction from much bigger problems." I drove to Sarah's office expecting another permit violation or zoning issue. What Jenny showed me was financial fraud on a scale that made my gate dispute look like a parking ticket. The rustle of financial documents spread across the conference table like evidence of a crime. Green Valley Maintenance filed a mechanic's lien against Willowbrook's common areas, Jenny explained, highlighting sections of legal paperwork. $47,000 in unpaid landscaping bills from 2022 and 2023. Storm damage cleanup, tree removal, emergency repairs, all authorized by Melody without proper board approval or budget allocation. The timeline was damning. Major storm hits in September 2022. Trees down everywhere, blocking roads and damaging property. Miguel Santos from Green Valley responds within hours, working around the clock to clear debris and restore access. Melody signs work orders totaling nearly $50,000. Then she simply doesn't pay. The sharp scratch of highlighter marking unpaid invoices dating back 18 months. But here's the real kicker, Jenny continued, pulling up HOA meeting minutes. Melody hid the debt from homeowners. Look at these budget reports. She listed the contractor payments as completed while using assessment money for legal fees and personal expenses instead. Sarah leaned back in her chair, whistling low. That's embezzlement. She took money designated for legitimate expenses and spent it on her personal vendetta against you. The mechanic's lien paperwork told the whole story. Miguel Santos had followed every legal requirement. Preliminary notices, deadlines, proper filings. He'd even offered payment plans and reduced settlements. Melody ignored everything, probably hoping he'd just go away. If this lien proceeds to foreclosure, Sarah explained, Green Valley can force sale of all common areas to collect their debt. Playground, walking trails, entrance landscaping. Everything that makes this a desirable neighborhood could be sold to developers. The electronic hum of the copy machine processing evidence that could destroy an entire community. I thought about my conversations with Miguel during those early weeks when Melody was harassing me. He'd seemed like a decent guy running a family business, the kind of contractor who shows up when emergencies happen and sends bills later because people need help immediately. "There's more," Jenny said, pulling out another folder. I found receipts for luxury hotel stays charged as HOA conference expenses and personal shopping sprees listed as office supplies. We're looking at $75,000 in financial irregularities over 2 years. The full picture crystallized like frost forming on a windshield. Melody's desperate legal campaign wasn't about gate access or property rights. It was about covering up financial crimes that could send her to prison. She needed revenue from access fees to secretly pay down HOA debt before anyone discovered her embezzlement. The satisfying click of puzzle pieces falling into place inside my head. What happens if the lien goes to foreclosure? I asked. Worst case scenario? Common areas get sold to strip mall developers, Sarah said. Best case? Emergency assessments of $1,000 or more per household to cover the debt. Either way, property values crash harder than Melody's credibility. I sat there processing the implications. 47 families facing financial ruin because their HOA president decided playing dictator was more important than paying bills. Kids losing their playground, neighbors losing walking trails, an entire community destroyed by one person's ego and criminality. What about Miguel? I asked. Is he willing to work with the community on payment plans? Jenny smiled. I already called him. 20-year family business, stellar reputation, never had payment issues before Melody. He's open to reasonable settlements if the HOA addresses this honestly. But that was the problem. Melody couldn't address anything honestly because honesty meant admitting to crimes that carried prison sentences. She was trapped in a web of lies that kept expanding, and my gate had become her escape route. The distant sound of traffic on the highway, the long route that everyone might be taking permanently if this community collapsed. I looked at the financial documents scattered across the table, evidence of a woman so desperate to maintain control that she'd rather destroy the thing she was supposed to protect. Time to decide whether I wanted revenge against Melody or justice for the neighborhood. Because in about 45 days, this was all going to become very, very public. That evening, Dorothy Chen knocked on my door with a thermos of coffee and the look of someone ready to start a revolution. We need to talk, she said, settling into Grandma's old porch swing like she'd been planning this conversation for weeks. About Melody, about the HOA, and about why you're probably the only person in this neighborhood with enough backbone to fix what she's broken. The gentle creak of the porch swing mixing with evening cricket songs. Turns out, Dorothy had been quietly building her own intelligence network. 6 years of Melody's reign had created an underground resistance of neighbors who whispered in grocery store aisles and shared horror stories over backyard fences. She'd been documenting everything, every bogus fine, every threatening letter, every abuse of power. Marcus wants in, Dorothy continued. So does Janet. We've got a CPA, a firefighter, and a retired teacher ready to take down a dictator. Question is, are you willing to lead the charge? The next morning, my kitchen became War Room Central. Marcus Reed brought municipal contacts and knowledge of emergency services procedures. Janet Kowalski arrived with her laptop and the kind of forensic accounting skills that make embezzlers wake up in cold sweats. And Miguel Santos, the contractor Melody had been screwing over, showed up with documentation that could bury her legally. The warm smell of fresh coffee mixing with the sound of papers shuffling and printers working overtime. Sarah laid out our three-pronged strategy like a general planning D-Day. Legal, maintain my property rights while offering reasonable community solutions. Financial, expose Melody's embezzlement and stabilize the HOA before it collapsed. Community, remove her from power while preserving neighborhood harmony. Janet, I need you to audit everything, Sarah said, spreading financial documents across my kitchen table. Every receipt, every assessment, every expense report. If she's stealing money, we need documentation that'll hold up in court. Janet's preliminary findings were worse than we'd imagined. Beyond the unpaid contractor bills, she'd discovered miscellaneous expenses totaling $23,000. Hotel receipts for conferences that didn't exist. Shopping sprees charged as office supplies. Cash advances on HOA credit cards for personal use. The electronic clicking of calculator keys adding up years of financial crimes. But the real breakthrough came when I remembered something from my divorce research. During those dark months, I'd learned about tax lien sales, how counties sell property for unpaid taxes after following strict legal procedures, usually boring stuff that only affects abandoned lots and foreclosed houses. Except I'd been tracking county auction notices out of habit, and there it was, Lot 47A, a 1.2-acre strip containing the main road section through Willowbrook. Previous owner died intestate, estate couldn't pay back taxes, county scheduled for public auction in 45 days. Holy shit, Marcus said, studying the tax maps. If you bought that parcel, you'd control the entire neighborhood's access. Sarah's eyes lit up like Christmas morning. That's not just leverage, that's checkmate. You could negotiate from a position of absolute strength. the satisfying rustle of county tax maps revealing the ultimate trump card. The financial calculation was beautiful in its simplicity. Tax debt totaled $12,400 including penalties. Estimated auction price, $15,000 to $20,000 maximum. For less than the cost of a decent used car, I could own the infrastructure that 47 families depended on daily. But this wasn't about revenge anymore. Miguel Santos sat at my kitchen table, explaining how 20 years of honest business was being destroyed by one woman's refusal to pay legitimate bills. He'd done emergency storm cleanup, probably saved lives, and got screwed for being a good neighbor. "I just want what I'm owed," he said quietly. "Fair payment for honest work." "Is that too much to ask?" Dorothy coordinated our community outreach through what she called coffee diplomacy, informal meetings with concerned neighbors who were ready for new leadership. Marcus used his municipal connections to verify emergency services access requirements and confirm that my gate setup was completely legal. Janet prepared a financial presentation that would shock the neighborhood into action. The distant sound of neighbors' conversations becoming more hopeful for the first time in years. While my allies handled their assignments, I spent evenings researching everything Sarah had taught me about property law. The difference between licenses and easements, between borrowed privileges and permanent rights. How generosity doesn't create legal obligations, and why being nice to neighbors actually protects ownership better than being mean. My grandmother had granted revocable permission for road access, not permanent easement rights. Courts recognized the distinction between favors and legal obligations. 40 years of neighborly cooperation didn't transfer property ownership. It just proved that some people knew how to be decent human beings. The gentle scratch of pen on legal pad as I documented every lesson learned. By week's end, we had comprehensive case files, financial evidence, community support, and a plan that would either restore sanity to the neighborhood or expose corruption that reached all the way to criminal court. Time to teach Melody Whitmore that declaring war on working-class property rights was the biggest mistake of her privileged life. 2 weeks before the tax auction, Melody discovered what we were planning. I'm replacing spark plugs in my garage when Brad Whitmore appears in my driveway, looking like a man who'd rather be anywhere else. Behind him sits a briefcase that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage, and the kind of nervous energy that screams, "Desperate times call for desperate measures." The metallic ping of tools hitting concrete as I wiped grease off my hands. "Ezra, we need to talk," he said, opening that briefcase to reveal stacks of cash arranged like a drug dealer's retirement fund. $30,000, cash, today. All you have to do is sign a permanent access easement and this whole mess goes away. 30 grand would solve a lot of problems. Truck repairs, house maintenance, maybe even a vacation I hadn't taken since the divorce. But I'd learned something important during those dark months when my ex-wife's lawyer tried buying me off with settlement offers. Easy money usually comes with expensive strings attached. "Brad, that easement would legally devalue my property by more than $30,000, I explained, closing his briefcase gently. "Thanks for the offer, but I'll pass." His face shifted from hopeful to threatening faster than his wife's mood swings. "Things could get much worse for you if you don't cooperate. Melody has connections at City Hall, county planning, even the state level. She can make your life very difficult." The distant sound of empty threats echoing off garage walls. That same week, the smear campaign escalated to federal levels. Anonymous letters arrived at Chuck Morrison's diesel shop, claiming I was mentally unstable and threatening neighborhood safety. Similar letters went to county commissioners, the newspaper editor, even my insurance company. Chuck showed me the letter during my Friday shift, shaking his head in disgust. 20 years I've known your family. Your grandmother was a saint, your daddy was solid as concrete, and you're cut from the same cloth. Whoever's writing these lies doesn't know the Blackwood name means integrity in this county." The crisp snap of anonymous letters being fed into Chuck's industrial shredder. But Melody's desperation was creating more problems than solutions. She filed complaints with every government agency that had letterhead, EPA about my illegal dumping, compost pile, OSHA about unsafe work conditions, home workshop, even the Postal Service about mail theft. Absolutely nothing. Each complaint required official responses, wasted taxpayer resources, and documented her pattern of harassment for my growing legal file. Captain Rodriguez called personally to warn about criminal charges for filing knowingly false reports. "Ezra, this woman's digging her own grave," he said. "Keep documenting everything, stay clean, and let her hang herself with her own rope." Meanwhile, Janet's complete financial audit revealed the full scope of Melody's crimes: $87,000 in total irregularities over 2 years. Forged board signatures on unauthorized expenditures, cash advances on HOA credit cards for personal expenses, even fake invoices for services never rendered. The electronic whir of printers working overtime to document years of financial fraud. But the real bombshell came when Elena Santos, Miguel's daughter, law student at the State University, volunteered to research Melody's background. What she found explained everything about our neighborhood nightmare. "Mr. Blackwood, this isn't Melody's first HOA war," Elena said, spreading newspaper clippings across my kitchen table. "Maplewood Estates, 2015 to 2018. Same pattern: power struggles, financial irregularities, harassment of neighbors who questioned her authority. That HOA actually filed a restraining order against her. Previous neighborhoods, same tactics. Pool maintenance contractor disputes, landscaping assessment battles, threats against anyone who challenged her leadership. The woman was a serial HOA terrorist, moving from community to community like a virus spreading neighborhood dysfunction, the satisfying thud of evidence files growing thicker by the day. Thursday's HOA meeting became Melody's public meltdown. Dorothy live-streamed everything as 31 of 47 households signed a petition supporting my property rights and questioning HOA financial management. When Janet tried presenting preliminary audit findings, Melody grabbed the microphone and started screaming about traitors and communist property theft. Marcus Reed stood up, all 6'4" of firefighter authority, and simply said, "Ma'am, you need to calm down or leave the meeting." Melody's response was pure theater. "You're all being manipulated by that psychopath. He's probably bribing every one of you to destroy our community." The electric tension of 47 neighbors watching their leader completely lose her mind. But while Melody was busy destroying her credibility in public, I was maintaining detailed surveillance documentation. Security cameras caught her photographing my property from multiple angles, apparently building some kind of insurance fraud case. Additional footage showed her attempting to access my mailbox, federal mail tampering charges if we could prove intent. The psychological profile was clear: cornered narcissist facing financial ruin and criminal prosecution, lashing out at anyone who threatened her manufactured reality. Sarah's forensic psychologist contact warned that desperate people sometimes resort to extreme measures when their world collapses. The quiet hum of security systems protecting against escalating desperation. Monday morning, auction day -7, I received my voter registration confirmation for the tax sale. Cash pre-approval secured, surveyor scheduled, legal team prepared for immediate post-purchase documentation. Time to show Melody what mutually assured destruction really looked like. Friday before the auction, and Melody's final week of freedom turned into a masterclass in self-destruction. I'm replacing brake pads when my phone explodes with notifications. The Willowbrook Facebook page had become ground zero for Melody's complete psychological breakdown. 17 posts in 2 hours, each more unhinged than the last. Screenshots of my property surveys labeled fake documents. Accusations that I was a dangerous extremist funded by anti-government militias. Claims that Dorothy, Marcus, and Janet were paid terrorists working to destroy American neighborhoods. The electronic buzz of notifications like machine gun fire against my concentration. But the crown jewel was her threat to expose the communist conspiracy at Sunday's emergency HOA meeting, complete with evidence that I was secretly working for foreign governments to undermine suburban property values. Apparently, a diesel mechanic who reads legal documents was clearly a sleeper agent for unnamed hostile nations. Dorothy called within minutes, voice shaking with laughter and horror. "Ezra, she's completely lost it. Half the neighborhood thinks she needs professional help, the other half is placing bets on when the police arrest her for harassment." The distant sound of sanity leaving the building at highway speeds. That weekend brought the culmination of Melody's legal harassment campaign. Saturday morning, building inspector arrives to investigate unpermitted construction modifications. My tool shed that's been standing since 1987. Sunday afternoon. County Health Department shows up about illegal waste disposal, my vegetable garden compost that Grandma started in 1995. Each inspector took one look at the complaints, compared them to actual violations. and left shaking their heads about frivolous reports filed by concerned citizens with obvious personal vendettas. "Ma'am, composting vegetables isn't illegal," the health inspector told Melody while she hovered over his shoulder like a litigation helicopter. "Growing your own food is actually encouraged by county environmental programs." But Monday brought the nuclear option: attempted bribery of public officials. County Commissioner Torres called personally to warn me. "Ezra, Mrs. Whitmore contacted my office offering a substantial donation to my re-election campaign in exchange for blocking your tax auction participation. I told her that's called bribery, and it's a felony." The sharp crack of another nail being hammered into Melody's legal coffin. Meanwhile, Janet's forensic accounting had uncovered the full extent of financial crimes. Beyond embezzlement and fraud, she'd discovered unauthorized loans using HOA assets as collateral. The woman had mortgaged community property to fund personal expenses, creating debt obligations that could bankrupt the entire development. She owes money to banks, contractors, credit card companies, and probably loan sharks, Janet explained during our final strategy meeting. The only way she avoids prison is if she can generate enough revenue to pay everyone back before they figure out what she's done. The electronic clicking of calculators adding up enough financial crimes to warrant federal investigation. Wednesday's revelation changed everything. Elena Santos called with news that made my morning coffee taste like victory champagne. Her law school research had uncovered something that nobody expected. Melody Whitmore wasn't even her real name. Margaret Whitfield, Elena read from court documents, convicted of embezzlement in Ohio 2008, served 18 months, changed her name legally in 2010, moved to our state to start fresh. She's a repeat offender with a pattern of financial crimes spanning multiple decades. The satisfying rustle of criminal background checks revealing a lifetime of fraud. But Thursday brought the event that would define everything. Melody's attempted break-in at my property. Security cameras caught everything in crystal clear detail. 2:47 a.m., dark clothing, wire cutters, attempting to disable my gate electronics. But this time, she'd brought Brad as backup, and their bumbling amateur hour burglary attempt looked like something from a bad comedy movie. Motion sensors triggered floodlights, phone alerts woke me instantly, and within minutes I was watching them scramble back to their Lexus like teenagers caught toilet papering houses. The footage showed clear faces, license plates, and enough evidence to prosecute for criminal trespassing, attempted burglary, and conspiracy. The electronic whir of security systems capturing felony crimes in real time. I called Captain Rodriguez, who arrived within 10 minutes looking like Christmas morning and dental surgery had arrived simultaneously. "Ezra, this footage is courtroom gold," he said, reviewing the evidence on my phone. "Breaking and entering, criminal conspiracy, attempted destruction of property. We can arrest them both tonight." But I had a better idea. "Captain, what if we wait until after the auction? Let them think they got away with it, then drop the hammer when they're already facing financial ruin?" His grin could have powered the neighborhood. "Son, I like the way you think." Friday morning, auction day -3, I received confirmation that nobody else had pre-registered for the tax sale. Melody and Brad were apparently too busy planning crimes to handle basic legal procedures. The crisp snap of certified mail confirming my strategic advantage. By week's end, Melody had transformed from neighborhood dictator to criminal defendant facing multiple felony charges. Her desperate attempts to maintain control had created enough evidence to justify federal prosecution for fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. Time to end this war, with the kind of victory that sends a message to every HOA tyrant in America. Auction day arrived like Christmas morning, and Judgment Day rolled into one crisp November package. County courthouse steps, 10 a.m. sharp, and the small crowd looked like a casting call for suburban drama. News vans from 3 local stations, curious neighbors with coffee cups, and Melody Whitmore, clutching a certified check like a life preserver on the Titanic. Her face had the pale, desperate look of someone who'd bet everything on a losing hand. The sharp crack of frost-covered courthouse steps under work boots, like walking on broken promises. Amanda Rodriguez from Channel 7 was setting up cameras when Sarah and I arrived with our documentation folder. Melody spotted us immediately, her eyes narrowing to slits that could cut glass. "This is illegal!" she screamed across the courthouse plaza. "He's stealing our neighborhood. Someone stop this terrorist." Brad stood beside her, looking like a man who'd watched his wife's sanity disappear in real time. holding their check with hands that shook like autumn leaves. Behind them, a handful of neighbors had gathered, some supporting, others just witnessing the final act of a 6-year dictatorship. The electronic hum of news cameras capturing every moment for evening broadcast. Auctioneer Bill Henderson called the proceedings to order with the enthusiasm of someone selling farm equipment. Lot 47A, 1.2 acres, minimum bid $12,400 for unpaid taxes, penalties, and interest. Do I hear opening bids? Melody's hand shot up like a student desperate to answer the teacher's question. 15,000! I waited exactly 3 seconds, letting the tension build like a pressure cooker reaching critical mass. 17,500. The collective intake of breath from 40 spectators watching financial warfare in real time. 20,000. Melody's voice cracked like a teenager asking for prom dates. 22,500. I replied calmly, sipping coffee from my thermos like we were discussing the weather. Brad grabbed Melody's arm, whispering frantically in her ear. Their life savings versus my strategic patience. Emergency assessments versus mortgage payments. Community survival versus personal bankruptcy. 25,000! Melody's final desperate bid, every syllable dripping with the knowledge that she was throwing good money after bad. The satisfying pause of absolute victory hanging in crisp morning air. $30,000, I said quietly, watching their faces transform from hope to horror to complete defeat. Bill Henderson's gavel came down like thunder. Sold to Ezra Blackwood for $30,000 cash. Melody collapsed against Brad like a marionette with cut strings, the weight of 6 years of criminality finally crushing her manufactured reality. Amanda Rodriguez captured every moment on camera while neighbors whispered among themselves about justice finally arriving. The metallic clang of courthouse doors closing on one chapter and opening another. But the real show started that evening at the emergency HOA meeting. Willowbrook's community center hadn't seen crowds like this since the development opened. 45 of 47 households attended, plus news crews, county officials, and Captain Rodriguez with handcuffs that gleamed like promised jewelry. Janet Kowalski took the podium first, her CPA credentials transforming her from quiet neighbor into financial prosecutor. Ladies and gentlemen, I present evidence of embezzlement totaling $87,000 over 2 years, she announced, displaying bank statements on the projector screen. Forged signatures, unauthorized credit card advances, fake invoices for services never rendered. The electric tension of truth finally being exposed under fluorescent lighting. Marcus Reed followed with documentation of harassment patterns, false police reports, frivolous complaints, threats against neighbors who questioned authority. Captain Rodriguez confirmed criminal investigations into multiple felony charges. Then, Dorothy Chen delivered the knockout punch. I move for immediate removal of Melody Whitmore from all HOA positions and authorization for new board members to negotiate reasonable access agreements with Ezra Blackwood. The vote was unanimous except for Melody and Brad, who sat in the back row like defendants awaiting sentencing, the satisfying scratch of ballots being marked for democracy and sanity. Melody tried grabbing the microphone for final dramatic statements, but Marcus Reed's firefighter training made him surprisingly effective at security work. Ma'am, you've lost the vote. Time to accept reality. That's when I stood up for my mic drop moment. Folks, I never wanted to be your enemy, I said, looking directly at families who'd been terrorized for years. I just wanted to control access to my own property. Now I own the road you all drive on, and here's what happens next. The dead silence of an entire community holding its breath. $50 per household per month for road maintenance and legal compliance. Emergency services guaranteed access at all times. Professional property management handles collections. Alternative option, build your own access road entirely on HOA property. The standing ovation lasted 3 minutes. 43 households supporting reasonable compromise over 6 years of dictatorship. Neighbors apologizing for believing lies about dangerous hermits and property extremists. Amanda Rodriguez interviewed both sides for evening news, but only one side made sense anymore. Property rights defended, community cooperation restored, criminal behavior exposed and prosecuted. The warm sound of neighbors talking like human beings instead of walking on eggshells. By 9 p.m., interim board members had been elected, access agreements authorized, and Melody's reign of terror officially ended. Justice served, community saved, democracy restored. 6 months later, and Willowbrook Estates looks like a completely different place. The access easement got negotiated and signed within 2 weeks of Melody's removal. $35 per household per month, less than most people spend on coffee, creates a road maintenance fund managed by a professional property management company. I retained ownership but granted permanent access rights with proper legal protections for everyone involved. The satisfying crunch of freshly paved asphalt under morning commuter tires. Melody and Brad pled guilty to embezzlement, filing false police reports, and attempted burglary. She got 18 months in minimum security, he got probation and community service. Restitution payments will stretch for years, but HOA insurance covered most of the financial damage from her mismanagement. The real victory was watching our neighborhood heal from 6 years of fear-based leadership. Dorothy Chen became HOA president in a landslide election, running on a platform of financial transparency and treating neighbors like human beings instead of subjects. New bylaws require monthly financial reports, board meeting recordings, and member approval for any expenditure over $500. The gentle sound of laughter replacing whispered conversations at mailboxes. Property values actually increased after the conflict resolution. Turns out, potential buyers prefer neighborhoods where disputes get solved through legal process rather than personal vendettas. Real estate agents now use our story as an example of strong community leadership overcoming temporary challenges. But the best part started with leftover money in the road maintenance fund. "We've got surplus revenue," Dorothy announced at the spring HOA meeting. "What should we do with it?" My suggestion surprised everyone, including myself. Start a scholarship fund for local trade school students. Name it after my grandmother, the Blackwood Community Scholarship. Help kids learn skills that build neighborhoods instead of destroying them. The warm applause of neighbors supporting education over litigation. First recipient was Elena Santos, Miguel's daughter, pursuing her law degree with focus on property rights and community mediation. Ironic that Melody's crimes helped fund the legal education of someone dedicated to preventing future HOA abuse. The scholarship program attracted statewide attention, inspiring similar initiatives in other communities. Local newspaper coverage turned our property dispute into a case study for resolving neighborhood conflicts through cooperation rather than confrontation. The electronic hum of printing presses spreading good news instead of legal threats. My consulting business grew from neighbors recommending my problem-solving approach to friends in other developments. Turns out, lots of communities deal with similar issues: property boundaries, easement disputes, HOA overreach. And having someone who understands both legal process and working-class common sense fills a real market need. Chuck Morrison hired me full-time as his diesel shop's equipment maintenance coordinator. Miguel Santos and I partnered on small construction projects, combining his landscaping expertise with my mechanical skills. The security camera system I installed became a side business serving neighbors who wanted protection without paranoia. The satisfying rhythm of honest work building community relationships. Last month, the county appointed me to the Planning Commission based on my experience with property rights education and community mediation. First item on my agenda: requiring all new developments to build access roads entirely on their own property, preventing future shortcut temptations that create 40-year legal problems. But the sweetest victory happens every morning when I sit on Grandma's porch with coffee, watching neighbors wave as they drive through the gate that caused so much trouble. Kids walk to school along sidewalks that got repaired with maintenance fund money. Families use the playground that almost got sold to pay Melody's debts. The peaceful sound of a community that learned democracy works better than dictatorship. The annual community festival gets held on my property now, celebrating cooperation over conflict. Last year's theme was property rights and community cooperation. Boring title, amazing barbecue, and the kind of neighbor relationships that make small-town America work when people choose principles over personalities. Ezra Blackwood, diesel mechanic turned property rights educator, living proof that ordinary people can defeat extraordinary bullies when they know their rights and refuse to be intimidated. The gentle evening breeze carrying the scent of Grandma's lavender and the sound of children playing. Your turn, folks. Drop your own HOA nightmare stories in the comments below. Let's see who's dealing with the next Melody Whitmore and needs some encouragement to stand up for their rights. What would you have done in my situation? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about ordinary people fighting back against petty tyrants. Ring that notification bell. Next week's story involves a parking dispute that went all the way to the Supreme Court and changed municipal ticketing forever. Sometimes the best revenge is building something better than what the bullies tried to destroy.